Only a handful of nations globally, such as Norway, the Netherlands, and Egypt, host training academies with the certification level found at CEDIFOP in Palermo, Italy, a centre that just passed a rigorous May 2026 audit by the International Diving Schools Association, or IDSA. This isn't just about high-level accreditation, though. It's about life and death in a world where human error can have fatal consequences at depths of dozens of metres. Alex, how significant is this audit for CEDIFOP and the broader industrial diving sector?
The audit is hugely significant, Theodore. CEDIFOP has now confirmed its position as the only centre in Italy to hold the title of IDSA full member for an impressive quarter of a century. This inspection visit on May 6th and 7th saw the global leadership of the IDSA present in Palermo. The presence of Leo Lagarde, the current chairman, and auditor Wim Gerrits underscores just how crucial this step is for the global training infrastructure of commercial divers. The IDSA, founded in 1982 specifically to standardise training, doesn't grant the full member title lightly.
So it's not just a rubber stamp. What specifically did the auditors scrutinise to ensure this standardisation?
Their scrutiny was absolute. They physically examined students' logbooks, checking the veracity and precision of every single dive entry. They also observed practical exercises for the inshore commercial diver course directly on the pier, evaluating not only technical execution, but also millimetre-level adherence to safety protocols. The principle here is that an IDSA certificate issued in Sicily must guarantee the exact same skills as one issued in Aberdeen or Stavanger. It's about global equivalence.
That concept of equivalence raises an interesting point. Italian legislation, specifically General Manager Decree No. 3173 of October 2024 from the Sicilian region, explicitly refers to the International Marine Contractors Association, IMCA, information notes. It effectively states that the minimum criteria for surface-supplied air divers are met through the IDSA Level 3 standard. This seems to transform a local training centre into a true international hub, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It transforms the diploma into a global passport. IMCA represents the largest companies in marine engineering and the offshore sector. When IMCA recommends IDSA Level 3, it's essentially telling multinational energy, subsea telecommunications and extraction companies that an operator trained to that standard is ready for safe offshore work. CEDIFOP issues Level 1 and 2 for inshore work, but crucially also Level 3, known as top-up. Without this regulatory convergence, an Italian diver would be confined to a narrow local market. Instead, training in Palermo is directly applicable on oil platforms in the North Sea or in Australia.
Many might confuse industrial diving with advanced recreational diving, yet the operational dynamics and risks are on completely different scales. Can you explain the practical differences between the inshore qualification, which is IDSA Level 2, and the offshore qualification, the Level 3 top-up, which the auditors monitored so closely at CEDIFOP? The difference lies fundamentally in the operating environment, depth, and the life support technologies involved. Level 2, the inshore occupational diver, qualifies the diver for work in inland and port waters, typically up to 30 metres deep. This involves heavy construction, underwater welding, or inspecting dams and ship hulls. The diver receives breathing gas through an umbilical connected to the surface, where a supervisor continuously monitors vital parameters and communication. In many European nations, this level guarantees direct access to most hydraulic civil construction sites. The Level 3 top-up represents the leap to deep water. Dives can reach 50 metres, and at that depth, decompression times become critical, and breathing gas management becomes exponentially more complicated. You start using recovery baskets and open bells. During the audit, CEDIFOP had to prove that the educational transition between port and offshore operations features impeccable instructional and instrumental progression. If the technological infrastructure and procedures are so standardised globally, I wonder if CEDIFOP's added value lies solely in possessing the certification. Is there a real risk that training centres in nations with lower labour costs could replicate these standards, potentially marginalising Italian excellence? The competition in this market must be fierce.
The risk of cost competition exists across all industrial sectors, but commercial diving has a formidable barrier to entry: legal liability in case of accidents. Insurance companies and multinationals like Eni, Saipem or Subsea 7 don't just look at the price of a staff training course, they look at the historical track record of safety. CEDIFOP has maintained its status for 25 years. This history of reliability is difficult to replicate in the short term. The IDSA table of equivalence serves precisely to prevent a race to the bottom. It isn't enough to claim you run an advanced course. The facility must undergo periodic checks like the one in May 2026. Furthermore, CEDIFOP's ecosystem includes associate members, such as companies specialising in diving helmets like Kirby Morgan, or marine works companies like Drafinsub. This continuous integration between technology producers, users and trainers creates an environment of excellence that is difficult to clone in purely cost-oriented context.
One element that stands out from the audit documentation is the international reciprocity. A graduate in Palermo can work in the United Kingdom due to equivalence with the British Health and Safety Executive, HSE, requirements. It extends beyond Europe too, with reciprocity in the US and Canada through ADCI and DCBC, and even Australia, where ADAS recognises Level 3 as equivalent to their Part 3 offshore air diver. This degree of regulatory convergence seems almost unique in vocational training. That regulatory convergence in industrial diving was a necessity dictated by blood. Before the IDSA's founding and standardization, each nation, and sometimes even individual oil companies, had their own rules. Operational discrepancies led to unacceptable mortality rates, especially during the North Sea exploration boom in the 1970s. The table of equivalence is the result of decades of analysed accidents and refined procedures. When a diver enters the water in Sydney or Vancouver, the technical language, the emergency procedures for recovering an unconscious body, the decompression calculations, all must be identical. This uniformity saves lives. The CEDIFOP audit verifies that the centre remains within this universal competency translation system. If the Palermo Centre were not aligned, its certificates would immediately lose equivalence with the HSE or ADAS, effectively destroying the international careers of its graduates. The involvement of local Sicilian institutions adds another layer of complexity. During the IDSA chairman's visit, there were institutional meetings with the Port System Authority and the Department of Labour of the Sicilian region. Luciano Cademi of the Port Authority stressed the importance of CEDIFOP for the safety of the port, while the Department of Labour manages the electronic register of diving. It seems unusual for an international training body to integrate so deeply with regional bureaucracy.
It does seem unusual, until you analyse the Sicilian regional laws. Regional Law No. 07 of 2016 and Presidential Decree 31 of 2018 established an electronic register that makes IDSA standards mandatory for the validity of professional qualifications in the regional context. This is a pioneering legislative step in Italy. It means the region decided not to invent its own local standard for underwater work safety, but anchored its legislation to a recognised international benchmark. Local institutions must interface with IDSA auditors because CEDIFOP's suitability guarantees, in a cascade effect, the validity of the entire regional regulatory system on diving. The meeting between Dutch auditor Wim Gerrits and Palermo officials wasn't a simple courtesy call, but the calibration of a legal mechanism that joins the port of Palermo to global safety.
This synergy between training, territory, and the global market brings to mind Daniele Farno's work, an expert in transitions between study and work. In his 2016 book, Youth Guarantee, The Challenge, Farno dedicated a chapter specifically to CEDIFOP, citing its 2015 audit.
he observed how that model managed to bridge the endemic gap between the training provided in southern Italy and the real needs of highly specialised multinationals. The fact that 11 years later, in 2026, the same centre is reconfirmed by the highest levels of the IDSA proves it wasn't a temporary statistical anomaly. Daniele Farno's analysis captured a structural point of the Italian labour market. Often vocational training is disconnected from real industrial demand, creating qualifications with no market value. The CEDIFOP model inverts this paradigm because it starts from the standard required by the end employers, namely IMCA and offshore contractors, and builds the training offer backwards to meet those exact requirements. When IDSA auditors evaluate the future planning of courses, they're measuring the centre's ability to anticipate new technological challenges, such as the integration between the diver in the water and remotely operated underwater vehicles, ROVs. The modern diver isn't just an underwater worker, but a specialised technician who interacts with robotic engineering. Maintaining accreditation ensures that students leave the school knowing how to operate in high-tech worksites.
The rigidity of the Consolidated Law on Safety in Italy, Legislative Decree 81 of 2008, often struggles to apply to hyperbaric activities due to their specificity. Adopting IDSA standards provides an unequivocal protocol for risk management. The 2026 audit establishes a clear principle. Safety isn't achieved by the simple administration of a theoretical course, but through training verified by third-party inspectors who understand the ruthless dynamics of the seabed. The model examined in Palermo demonstrates that operational competence must be demonstrated, tracked, and internationally recognized to protect human lives in an environment that forgives no distraction. Traceability is indeed the pivot of the entire system. The logbook that IDSA auditors examine isn't just a record, it's a legal document that attests to the diver's experience. A procedural error in training doesn't just cause economic damage, it exposes the operator to embolisms, oxygen toxicity, or hypothermia. The severity of the May audit reflects the uncompromising nature of the industry. The final result is a professional capable of operating with maximum efficiency and safety, able to communicate technically with colleagues from different continents, united by a single rigorous standard. If this deep dive into industrial diving standards intrigued you, share this episode with anyone fascinated by subsea engineering or maritime safety.